I'm 79 years old now. My hands shake when I hold a coffee cup. My daughter says it's just age, just the years catching up. She doesn't know it started in 1944. She doesn't know that every time I hear thunder, I'm back in that landing craft, listening to artillery shells scream overhead. She doesn't know that the 30 seconds after that ramp dropped are more vivid to me than anything that's happened in the 79 years since. My name is Robert Jameson, but back then I was just Private Jameson, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Infantry Division. I was 20 years old, fresh out of Camp Blanding in Florida, where they'd taught me to shoot, to march, to follow orders. They taught me a lot of things. They never taught me what it's like to watch a man's head explode 6 inches from your face. It was June 6th, 1944. We'd been stuck on those transport ships off the coast of Normandy since the night before, and the channel was rough. Real rough. Most of the guys were puking their guts out before we even got near the beach. I remember Corporal Mitchell from Kentucky kept saying it was the breakfast, that the Navy couldn't cook worth a damn. But we all knew it was fear. Pure, stomach-churning fear. They loaded us into the Higgins boats around 5 in the morning. 36 men per boat, packed in tight, shoulders touching. The smell of vomit and diesel fuel and sweat mixing together until you couldn't breathe without tasting it. The boat rocked so hard some guys fell over, their packs too heavy to let them balance. Mine weighed about 60 pounds. Rifle, ammunition, grenades, rations, entrenching tool, gas mask. All the shit they said we'd need to take a beach held by the Germans for 4 years. I was toward the front of the boat, not the very front. That was Sergeant Hooper and 2 guys from Virginia whose names I can't remember anymore. But I was close. Close enough that when the ramp went down, I'd be one of the first ones off. At the time, I thought that was good. Get off fast, get to cover fast, survive. That's what they told us in training. Speed and aggression. Move fast and the enemy can't draw a bead on you. I didn't know then that the guys at the front of the boat were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. The run to the beach took about 40 minutes, but it felt like hours. The boat pilot, some kid from Ohio who couldn't have been more than 19, kept looking back at us with this expression like he wanted to say something, wanted to apologize maybe. The naval officer in charge of our boat kept checking his watch, shouting updates over the sound of the engine and the waves. 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Nobody was talking. That's what I remember most clearly about that ride in. 36 men, most of them younger than 25, and not a single word. Just the sound of the engine, the waves hitting the hull, and guys breathing hard through their mouths because they were too scared to trust their noses not to pull in the stink of their own fear. I looked at the guy next to me. His name was Danny Sullivan from Boston. Red hair, freckles, couldn't have weighed more than 140 pounds soaking wet. He was holding his rifle so tight his knuckles were white, and he was staring straight ahead at the ramp, like if he looked at it hard enough, he could see through it to what was waiting on the other side. I wanted to say something to him, something like, "We'll be okay," or "stick together," or any of the bullshit you hear in the movies. But I couldn't. My throat was too dry, and besides, what the hell did I know? I'd never seen combat. None of us had except for Sergeant Hooper, and even he'd only been in North Africa for a few months before getting shipped to England for this. The sounds changed when we got close to the beach. At first it was just the engine and the waves, but then you started to hear other things. Explosions. Not close, but close enough. The crack of artillery shells landing somewhere ahead of us, the deeper boom of naval guns firing from the destroyers behind us, and then underneath all of that something else. Something that sounded like rain on a tin roof, but faster, more insistent. That was machine gun fire hitting the water around the boats. The officer shouted, 2 minutes, and I watched Sergeant Hooper cross himself. He was Catholic, I think. Or maybe he wasn't and he just figured it couldn't hurt. Either way, seeing him do that made my stomach drop even further, because if a guy who'd already seen combat was asking for divine intervention, what chance did the rest of us have? 1 minute. The boat slowed down. We were supposed to get right up to the beach, but I felt us stop short, felt the bottom of the boat scrape against something. A sandbar, maybe, or one of those obstacles the Germans had put in. The pilot was shouting something, but I couldn't hear him over the noise. Everything was noise now. Explosions, gunfire, the engine straining, men breathing. my own heartbeat hammering in my ears so loud I thought everyone could hear it. 30 seconds, the officer screamed, and that's when I saw him grab the mechanism that controlled the ramp. His hand was shaking. This Navy officer who was supposed to be experienced, who was supposed to know what he was doing, his hand was shaking so bad he almost couldn't work the lever. That's when I knew we were fucked. I looked up at the sky one last time. It was grey. Heavy clouds, but starting to break up in places, letting through shafts of early morning light. I remember thinking it was too pretty a day for what was about to happen. My mother used to say that before a storm back in Ohio, too pretty a day for rain. But the rain was coming anyway. Ramp down! Go! 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 The ramp dropped. That's when time stopped making sense. The first thing I saw was the beach. It was supposed to be 100 yards away. That's what they'd told us in the briefing. The boats would get us to within 100 yards, and we'd wade in, move fast, get to the seawall. But we weren't 100 yards out. We were at least 200, maybe more. The water was deep, dark. I could see obstacles sticking up out of it. Steel beams, wooden stakes, things designed to rip the bottom out of landing craft. The second thing I saw was the tracers, green lines cutting through the air like lasers, crisscrossing in front of the ramp, over it, around it. The Germans were firing from positions up the bluff, from pillboxes we couldn't even see yet, and the tracers were so thick it looked like you couldn't walk through them without getting hit. The third thing I saw was Sergeant Hooper die. He stepped off the ramp. No, he didn't step. He jumped, trying to get clear of the boat fast like they'd taught us, and before his boots hit the water, his chest exploded. The rounds hit him high, right in the upper torso, and I saw pieces of him, fabric, flesh, I don't know, spray back toward us. He went down face first into the water, and it turned red around him so fast it was like someone had dumped a bucket of paint. The two guys from Virginia went next. They didn't even make it off the ramp. They were following Hooper, moving fast like they were supposed to, and they both got cut down before they could jump. One of them fell forward into the water. The other one fell backward, right across the ramp, and Danny Sullivan tripped over him. All of this happened in maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds and 3 men were dead. Move! Move! Get off the goddamn boat! The officer was screaming now, his voice cracking with panic, and the guys behind us were pushing forward because that's what you do. That's what they trained you to do. You keep moving. You don't stop. Stopping means dying. Danny was trying to get up, trying to get his footing on the ramp that was now slick with blood, and I reached down to help him because he was right there, right next to me, and that's when the rounds hit the side of the boat. They were firing at the boat itself now, trying to kill us before we could even get off, and the steel hull rang like a bell. One of the rounds punched through and hit a guy behind me. I heard him scream. I pulled Danny up and we jumped together. The water was cold. Shockingly cold. It came up to my chest immediately, and the weight of my pack tried to drag me down. My rifle was over my head. They'd told us to keep our rifles dry, like that mattered. Like anything mattered except not drowning. And I was trying to move forward, trying to wade toward the beach that looked impossibly far away. Danny was next to me, and then he wasn't. I saw the water around him turn pink, saw him go down without a sound, just slipped under. And I couldn't stop, couldn't reach for him, couldn't do anything because the water was too deep and I was too slow and the bullets were hitting everywhere. That's when I realized what I was wading through. Bodies. There were bodies in the water. Men from the boats that had landed before us. Men who'd made it off their ramps only to die 20 feet from their boat. They were floating face down, held up by their life preservers, bobbing in the waves. Some of them were in pieces. Arms gone, heads gone. One guy was just a torso, no legs, floating there like driftwood. I pushed past a dead man, and then another one, and I was screaming, but I couldn't hear my own voice over the gunfire. The MG-42s the Germans were using, they fired so fast it didn't even sound like individual shots. Just one long tearing sound, like ripping cloth, and everywhere that sound pointed, men died. Ahead of me, maybe 50 yards away, I could see the beach itself, bodies everywhere. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Some of them were moving, crawling, trying to get to cover. Most weren't moving at all. The sand was dark with blood and the tide was coming in, washing over the dead and dying like the ocean was trying to clean up the mess we were making. I was still in the water, chest deep, when I saw something that made me stop. A man was standing up ahead, just standing there in waist-deep water. not moving. His helmet was gone. His rifle was gone. He was just standing there with his arms at his sides facing the beach, and I could see rounds hitting the water around him, splashing up. But he didn't move. He just stood there. Then his head snapped back and he went down. I don't know how long I'd been in the water at that point. 20 seconds, 30. It felt like hours, but it couldn't have been more than half a minute. The ramp had dropped, and in 30 seconds maybe half the men in our boat were dead or dying. I made it to shallower water, maybe knee-deep now, and I could move faster. There were other guys around me from our boat or other boats, I couldn't tell. We were all just moving toward the beach because that's what you do. You move forward. You don't think, you just move. Something hit my shoulder, not a bullet. I don't think it was a bullet, but something knocked me sideways and I went down. The water went over my head, and for a second I was sure I was going to drown, sure that I'd survived the machine guns just to drown in 3 feet of water. But my feet found bottom, and I pushed up, came up gasping, and that's when I saw what had hit me. It was an arm, just an arm, torn off at the shoulder, still in a sleeve with corporal stripes on it. It was floating in the water, and it had bumped into me. I threw up, right there in the water. I vomited up everything in my stomach, and then I vomited up bile, and then I was just dry heaving while rounds hit the water around me and men screamed and died. I have no memory of getting to the beach, none. 1 second I was in the water, puking and crying and trying not to look at the arm floating next to me. The next second I was on the sand, lying flat behind a metal obstacle, one of those Czech hedgehogs they'd put in to stop tanks, and I was still alive. That's when the 30 seconds ended. That's when I became someone different. I looked back at the water. Our boat was still there, ramped down, but it was empty now. Empty except for the bodies on the ramp and the bodies in the water around it. I couldn't see how many had made it out. I couldn't see Danny. I couldn't see anyone I recognized. What I could see was the next wave coming in. More Higgins boats, a dozen of them, heading straight for the beach, heading straight for the same machine guns, the same artillery, the same killing zone we'd just come through. And I knew with absolute certainty that in about 2 minutes those ramps would drop, and another 200 men would die in the first 30 seconds. I wanted to scream at them. Turn back. Go away. This beach is death. This whole fucking beach is death, and you're coming right into it. But I couldn't scream. I couldn't make a sound. I just lay there behind that steel obstacle, pressing my face into the sand that was wet with seawater and blood, and I watched those boats come in. The guy next to me was crying. Not loud, not making a scene, just tears running down his face, mixing with the sand and the salt water. He was maybe 18. I didn't know his name. He looked at me and said, "I want to go home." I didn't say anything. What could I say? We weren't going home. Most of us weren't going anywhere except into the sand or into the water. This beach was a graveyard, and we were the ghosts that hadn't figured out we were dead yet. The next boats hit the beach. The ramps went down. It started all over again. I don't remember much about the rest of that day. I remember moving. I remember getting off the beach somehow, getting up to the seawall, getting beyond it. I remember there were engineers trying to blow gaps in the wire, and I remember following other men through one of those gaps, and I remember climbing the bluff that had seemed impossible to climb. I remember finding a rifle that wasn't mine and using it. I remember shooting at things, pillboxes, windows, shadows, and I don't know if I hit anything or if I just wasted ammunition. I remember night falling and being surprised that I was still alive, surprised that any of us were still alive. They told us later that we'd won, that D-Day was a success, that we'd established a beachhead and the liberation of Europe had begun. They gave us medals, some of us. They put our division in the history books. But I wasn't there for any of that. I was still on that beach, in those 30 seconds after the ramp dropped, watching Sergeant Hooper die, watching Danny go down in the water, watching that arm float past me like a piece of garbage. I spent the rest of the war trying to forget those 30 seconds. I fought through France, through Belgium, into Germany. I saw more death, more destruction, more horror than any 20-year-old should ever see. But nothing was as bad as those first 30 seconds on Omaha Beach. When the war ended, I came home. I got a job. I met a woman. I got married. I had kids. I did all the things you're supposed to do, all the things that make a normal life. But I was never normal again. How could I be? Normal people don't know what it's like to wade through floating body parts, Normal people don't know what it sounds like when a MG-42 is firing at you, that tearing sound that means death is cutting through the air. Normal people don't know what it's like to lie in the dark at night and see Danny Sullivan's face, see him going under the water, and know that you could have tried harder to save him, that maybe if you'd been faster or braver or better, he'd have made it. My wife knew something was wrong. She'd ask me about the war sometimes, especially early on, and I'd tell her it was fine, it was over, I didn't want to talk about it. After a while, she stopped asking. My kids never knew. They knew I'd been in the war, knew I'd been at D-Day, but they thought that was something to be proud of. They thought their old man was a hero. I never told them about the 30 seconds. I tried once. My son, when he was about 20, same age I'd been, he asked me what it was like, what it was really like. We were at a barbecue, 4th of July, and he'd had a few beers, and I guess he felt brave enough to ask, and I wanted to tell him. I wanted to explain that war isn't what you see in movies, that it's not heroic or glorious or meaningful, that it's just death, random, senseless death, that you don't charge up a beach yelling battle cries. You wade through water thick with your friend's blood while pieces of them float past you, and you're so scared you can't think, can't breathe, can't do anything except keep moving forward, because stopping means dying. I wanted to tell him all of that, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. The words were there, but they wouldn't come. So I told him it was tough, that we did what we had to do, that I was proud to serve. The same bullshit everyone says. And he nodded and said he understood, and he didn't understand a goddamn thing. That was 40 years ago. He's got grandkids now. I'm 79 years old, and I still can't tell him, but I can tell you. I can tell you that when that ramp dropped, I learned something about humanity that I wish I'd never learned. I learned that we're fragile. So fragile. A human body can be destroyed so easily, so completely, that nothing remains but meat. I learned that courage doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being so terrified that you can't think straight, and moving forward anyway. Not because you're brave, but because everyone around you is moving, and you don't know what else to do. I learned that in war. You don't fight for noble causes or grand ideals. You fight because the guy next to you is fighting. You fight because turning back means letting down the men who are already dead. You fight because it's easier than admitting that all of this, all the death, all the suffering might be for nothing. And I learned that some things never leave you, not ever. It's been 79 years since that ramp dropped. 79 years since I saw Sergeant Hooper's chest explode. 79 years since I watched Danny Sullivan disappear under the water, and I still see it, every night when I close my eyes, every time I hear thunder, every time I smell the ocean. Those 30 seconds changed me forever, just like the title says, but not in the way people think, not in some profound, meaningful way that made me a better person or taught me to appreciate life. It broke something inside me, something that was never fixed, that can't be fixed. I'm not the same person who got on that boat in the dark that morning. That kid from Ohio who thought he knew what courage was, who thought he could handle whatever war threw at him, he died in those 30 seconds. What came off that beach was someone else. Someone who'd seen too much, who knew too much, who could never go back to being innocent or naive or hopeful. Sometimes people thank me for my service. Young people mostly, who weren't born until decades after the war ended. They shake my hand and they say, "Thank you for your sacrifice," and I nod and say, "You're welcome," because that's what you're supposed to do. But I want to tell them that they don't understand what they're thanking me for. They think they're thanking me for being brave, for fighting for freedom, for being a hero. But I wasn't brave, I was terrified, and I didn't fight for freedom. I fought to survive. And I'm not a hero. Heroes are the guys who died in those first 30 seconds. Heroes are Sergeant Hooper and Danny Sullivan, and the two guys from Virginia whose names I never knew. Heroes are the men who didn't make it off the beach, who gave everything in the first wave so that the second wave and the third wave and the 100th wave could eventually break through. I'm not a hero. I'm just a survivor. And sometimes, most times, I'm not sure that's something to be proud of. My daughter brought me to the beach last summer. Not Omaha Beach. I've never been back there. Could never go back there. But a beach in Florida, near where she lives. She thought it would be nice. Thought I'd enjoy the ocean air, the sound of the waves. She doesn't know that the sound of waves makes me think of bodies floating. that the smell of salt water brings back the smell of blood and diesel fuel and fear. I sat in my chair and watched the water come in and go out, and I thought about those 30 seconds. I thought about how many times I've relived them, how many thousands of nights I've lain awake going over every detail, wondering if there was something I could have done differently, something that would have saved Danny or Hooper or any of the others. And I realized that I'll be thinking about those 30 seconds when I die, that they'll be the last thing I see before everything goes dark. Not my wife, not my kids, not the good things in my life, just the ramp dropping, the water turning red, the bodies floating, the sound of the MG-42s, the impossibility of the beach ahead. Those 30 seconds are my whole life now. Everything before them seems like it happened to someone else, and everything after them has been colored by them, shaped by them, defined by them. I got married in their shadow. I raised my children in their shadow. I've grown old in their shadow. And the worst part, the part I've never told anyone, the part I'm only now admitting to myself, is that some part of me is still there. Still in the water, still 20 years old, still watching my friends die, still too scared to move, too scared to help, too scared to do anything except keep my head down and survive. That part of me never got off the beach. It's still there, 79 years later, waiting for the nightmare to end. Waiting to wake up and find out this was all a terrible dream, that I'm back in Ohio, that I'm still a kid who doesn't know what war really means. But I'll never wake up. Because it wasn't a dream. It was real. Every second of it was real. The blood was real. The screams were real. The death was real. And it's still real every single day. People ask me sometimes if I have any regrets, if there's anything I'd do differently if I could go back. And I tell them no, that I'm at peace with my choices, that I did what I had to do, but that's a lie. If I could go back, I'd tell that 20-year-old kid getting on that Higgins boat in the dark to jump overboard, to swim back to the transport ship, to go AWOL, to do anything except get on that beach because nothing is worth what he's about to see. But I can't go back. None of us can. All I can do is carry those 30 seconds with me until I die, and hope that whatever comes next doesn't have beaches or ramps or machine guns or young men dying in water that turns red with their blood. I'm 79 years old now. My hands shake when I hold a coffee cup, and I know that when my time comes, when I finally close my eyes for the last time, I'll be back on that boat. I'll hear the officer shout, "Ramp down!" I'll see it drop, and I'll have to live through those 30 seconds one more time. That's my forever. That's what I saw when the ramp dropped. And it did change me forever, just like the title says. It made me into this, a ghost pretending to be alive, a shell of a man going through the motions, someone who survived when better men didn't, and has spent 79 years trying to figure out why. I don't have an answer. I don't think there is one. All I have are those 30 seconds, and they're all I'll ever have.